It's been a while since I explored an old television horror anthology, especially one that isn't almost completely missing. So I thought I'd talk about Supernatural, a show that I can only describe as sophisticated. While in my opinion, Dead of Night wasn't as successful at avoiding the cliches of modern horror as much as it wanted to, and that's not a negative, Supernatural does a pretty good job and replicates the feeling of old 1920s and 30s horror stories. It's set in the 1800s, and that adds the layer of sophistication that hasn't been matched by most other old-school horror anthologies, in my opinion. It doesn't make it better, but it does make it stand out amongst the crowd. It's also fortunate this show came out a year before the junking policy ended, which may very well have played a factor in its survival. Thanks to Mysterious Domain Movie Palace, a very quirky and interesting American lady with a vast film, book and television collection online, the full episodes are available on YouTube. She even has a copy of a book about the show, which is pretty cool. Her favourite is Dorabella, which is also my personal favourite, so rock on. The show is basically about people auditioning to be part of a group called Club of the Damned. A bunch of old farts who basically gather around and tell each other horror stories while drinking brandy, and if you don't succeed in the initiation, they have you executed. When the show was released on DVD by the BFI as part of their Gothic, the Dark Heart of Film collection of releases, I had no idea that a few years later I'd own a copy and binge all 50-minute episodes within a matter of days. It's a macabre, gothic, downright creepy show at points, especially for its time. The show was created by Robert Mueller, who was adamant about avoiding modern gore and other slasher themes in horror at the time. He wanted classic stories about ghosts, vampires, and werewolves. Each episode is supposed to be a standalone story, but episodes 2 and 3 shared a cast and linked plot. Of note was the 2 episodes featured actress Billie Whitelaw, who was married to Mueller. You might recognise her, and we'll get into that in a little bit. She's quoted as having said, "Robert wrote the story with me in mind, but I said I would not read it until it was sent to me by a producer or director. I wanted the thing kept on a professional footing. During rehearsals, we never discussed the play at home, and in the rehearsal room, I would never address Robert directly if I had any query or suggestion. I would always go through the director." Very professional. Unfortunately, Supernatural received a mixed response from audiences and low ratings, most likely due to its unfortunate summertime transmission despite being a gothic horror show featuring mythic monsters and death. Effectively, it only lasted for 1 series. Tonight, let's explore that series. Ghost of Venice is a weird one in the sense that I wouldn't quite call it a horror, but rather a supernatural drama that explores the inevitable fate that is death. A narcissistic actor named Adrian Gall is having an existential crisis in his old age, deciding to ditch his supposedly unwell wife injured in a stage accident so he can return to Venice and deal with an unresolved case of treachery from his past.
God, you cannot deny it! You're telling me I'm a liar?
Try and go back to sleep, dearest. Those dreadful rages and all for nothing, for nothing. Look at your hands.
This isn't the most eventful play for a series called Supernatural, but for what it is, it works okay. Most of the studio-bound production shot entirely on videotape takes place in this dodgy Italian outside cafe or bar, with the only other set scene being the Ghoul's master bedroom, Ghoul's mirror room, I guess, in this house in Venice, a bridge over the supposed canal, and some kind of old cathedral in the city. Ghoul is played by the late great Robert Hardy, mostly known for his performances as Winston Churchill and Siegfried Farnan in All Creatures Great and Small. I quite like the courtyard setting because it's always populated by older gentlemen being pursued by seductive young Italian women, possibly prostitutes, who are only there for the wine and the grub. Since Ghoul is such a bizarre and eccentric character delivered with a super hammy and enjoyable performance by Hardy, he only really interacts with 4 characters. His wife, Leonora, an Italian lady,
Too late, old man. Do you think that I want your money? Or maybe to steal your purse? Huh? Sleep alone, then.
And a police prefect who recognises and admires Ghoul from his days as an actor. Ghoul even goes ballistic, despite the man complimenting him and treating him to a bottle of wine to share. But the prefect doesn't once lose his cool until the final breaking point where Ghoul seemingly strangles him during a scuffle on a canal bridge. To be fair, the over-the-top acting isn't entirely Hardy's fault, seeing as most of the dialogue he's given to work with is almost comically dated at points. There are some good lines that he delivers genuinely well, the standout for me being,
You are most insolent, whore. Do you imagine you know me?
a particularly awful line, in my opinion, would be,
Let us remember that all life is a joke, and that what comes after is funnier still.
I don't know why, it's just really funny to me, and the delivery doesn't help. Pretty soon, Leonora, the young lady who Ghoul remembers as an aspiring actress seeking better parts, shows up, and Ghoul believes that the prefect of police is lying when he does not remember her. The prefect is very patient and seems to believe that Ghoul is in some way mad or unwell, choosing to go easy on him with every confrontation. It's made abundantly clear that Leonora is, well, the ghost in Venice, or perhaps even a hallucination, invented by Ghoul's mind to boost his undying ego as the great Adrian Ghoul, Shakespearean actor. He clearly fancies her and desires a younger woman, but she remains ominous and suitably mysterious. Adrian's mind slips further and further away, imagining a future with Leonora full of love but without remorse or apprehension or any consideration when it comes to others, focused solely on themselves. He is obsessed. She even teaches him Italian, supposedly, but he is constantly tormented by locals who see him as a lonely Englishman who mutters to himself like a creep in the alley, which he basically is. It's unclear what's real and what isn't beyond his interaction with the prefect, but Leonora claims that Ghoul murdered her that fateful day when a terrible accident the prefect can't remember took place. In between the main story, Ghoul's wife, Charlotte, is having problems of her own, pretending to still be an invalid after the accident that presumably also killed Leonora, and essentially lacking sex in her marriage, although this is only really touched on once. She's only otherwise featured in the intro where Ghoul basically abuses her and talks about himself, despite being an old duffer as well, and when she wakes up in the middle of the night and somehow senses her husband has killed someone. It's very strange. There's a pretty cool scene where Ghoul fantasizes about scaring the locals in a Phantom of the Opera fashion, and he winds up acting on this by attempting to scare the prefect, who believes he is practicing a new part before being confronted over the theft Ghoul reported, which leads to Ghoul killing him after being told that Leonora drowned in the river and Ghoul was responsible for his own wife's accident. Just as Ghoul becomes fully sucked in by Leonora's admiration of him, he is drawn back to the bridge once again, now seeing the spirit of the prefect he killed. He tries to ask her something, but immediately forgets, which I thought was pretty funny.
Tell me, I must know. Tell me this one thing, and I will ask no more.
Seek to know no more.
I will be satisfied. Deny me this, and an eternal curse fall on you. Let me know. Oh, I can't remember.
She finally snaps and drops her friendly facade, ridiculing Ghoul for sidelining her for his wife. The prefect, however, is revealed to be alive. I thought this was really weird because the reveal he's alive is immediately after the shot of the three of them on the bridge. It was just a weird choice and felt a little like padding. It's then revealed the prefect killed Ghoul during the attack, not the other way around, leaving him to be with Leonora in the streets of Venice forever.
I didn't kill him.
No, poor man, of course not. He killed you. Now we can be together. Forever and ever. Alone. Together. Forever.
It built a few interesting questions, like how long was he actually dead for, and how much of what transpired actually took place, or was just chalked up by the mind of a narcissist. I'm kind of disappointed because I think him being a hallucinating ex-actor past his prime, going bad in the streets of Venice, being bullied by prostitutes before drowning himself in the canal, would have been a slightly better idea. But I'm not a television writer or a published author, so I won't say anything else other than it doesn't need to actually be a ghost story. Keep in mind, the term supernatural only means what we don't understand, not necessarily something otherworldly or spiritual. The last speech is genuinely haunting, and the ending is genuinely great as the leader of the Club of the Damned returns with a letter claiming Gaul will be absent. Everyone in the room then realises he has disappeared, as they hear his and Leonora's ghosts laugh from beyond.
Absent?
Shame, because I think he would have made it into the club. Overall, the play is really dated and corny, but it has some good scenes, the occasional genuinely good and genuinely hilarious acting, and it's quite admirable as a theatre production on television. There's nothing all that special about the presentation, but the grey moodiness and dryness adds to the feeling of melancholy and intrigue. 6 out of 10. In the first of the series' only two-parter, Countess Ilona, played by the impeccable Billy Whitelaw of Stage, Omen, and Hot Fuzz fame, invites 4 gentlemen from her past to her remote manor in Hungary, only to subject them to a slow but terrible fate. Since these are technically the same story, I'll review them as one episode. First things first, the cast are all absolutely brilliant. Keep in mind that The Omen was only released a year beforehand. Whitelaw was clearly a very versatile and unique actress, and the world of theatre and film is worse off without her. Ian Hendry, John Fraser, Charles Kay and Edward Hardwicke are all great actors, and the 5 main members of the cast have a perfect chemistry and dynamic amongst themselves that benefits the already tight script perfectly. The dialogue also isn't hammy and comical at points like Ghost in Venice's was. The set design, costume design, hair and makeup are absolutely brilliant, especially the banquet hall, which is lush, vast and gorgeous. The spacious nature of it is surprising given the claustrophobia present in Ghost in Venice. On top of that, there's several film sequences, including the opening scene for Club of the Damned, unlike Ghost in Venice when it was shot on videotape. It adds a much creepier atmosphere and gives the play a lot more character. The film look really is a breath of fresh air, especially the woods and manor shots seen throughout. There's really creepy and sickening POV shots of characters who have been drugged, as well as for the unseen shadowy lycanthrope who stalks the manor. In the beginning, a pompous member of Club of the Damned is late for the meeting, so he is locked out of the room while a mysterious man only known as He hopes that his story will let him into the club. The story he tells relates to Countess Ilona, a former cafe entertainer who is not known to have worked in Venice, who was born into poverty, rising through the ranks using her beauty and guile, only to be used by many men along the way. The main setting, September 1880, is when Ilona is celebrating the 10-year anniversary of her marriage and subsequent widow status to the violent and evil Count Anton von Tyr. I probably butcher that pronunciation. Yet another man who used and abused Ilona after the ones before him passed her on. Out of her marriage, Ilona was given an adorable blonde-haired son. To celebrate, Ilona invites men she has tricked into believing the party is some kind of ball. In reality, these men belonging to the higher reaches of society share the common status of being a former lover of Ilona's, and are treated to a private dinner party. She has a slightly unusual diet of coffee, raw egg yolk, raw meat mince, and some kind of vegetable on a pile together, remaining upstairs and relaxing while the men make themselves at home. Her son Bella is usually in his room with his creepy grandmother Magda, refusing to read books and overall just not being a great actor.
You must read.
I hate it. I hate all books.
There's a bit of foreshadowing with a Red Riding Hood book, which I thought was pretty cool. There's a bit of tension between the servant, Andrus, and Magda in the beginning, which shows that the care for young Bella is on point. All 3 men who arrive on time are suitably reprehensible and boisterous, enjoying the countryside escape from the vile air of the city. The first to arrive, Zoltan, was a revolutionary, but became an immensely rich arms dealer by siding with the leaders he once fought against. While he is objectively the least horrible of the main four men, he is a rat and parasite at heart who enjoys leisure a bit too much. Taking the fancy route in horse carriages, Felix Kraus is a retired doctor who retired upon inheriting a fortune, now dedicating himself to the seduction of women. As a weird trophy collection, he takes a lock of hair, a love letter, and a garter to remind him of his sexual conquests. Fucking hell. He and Zoltan are shown to like each other initially, although for Felix, it is a front, subtly displaying signs of disdain for the more uncouth man when they first socialise. The younger, silver spoon-fed, and particular Hugo Hoffman chose to walk to the mansion and is effectively the latest, immediately ruining his beige trousers handcrafted for him a day before. They don't look very dirty when he enters the building though, which is probably just a small continuity issue. A small detail is that the assistant who carried his stuff runs away at lightning speed, suggesting that the castle is feared by locals. The car's chemistry and stage-like atmosphere is particularly excellent between the three of them, although Hugo is easily the worst in my opinion, being a vain, rude, angry little man who blames everyone except himself for the issues he causes. Remember, his alcohol has to be the perfect temperature.
But this fatal accident... This is not the wine I've ordered. Sickening incompetence. That can only be served well chilled. Kindly bring me some Wielberger Spätauslese 67 at the correct temperature.
While Felix is there, he already decides he wants to bang the servant Silver, a self-proclaimed erotomane who he suspects is in love with the male servant. Yeah, he's a psychologically tormenting creep. I really like the fixation on this dog which is chained up outside and seen being walked by Ilona during some of the film sequences. At one point I actually thought the dog was going to be the wolf, but I think it's just an inclusion to suggest the Countess likes her men to be a little more canine. That's all I'll say for now. The servants are very polite and tolerant of the three creeps throughout dinner, and there's a sinister edge to Andras, almost like he knows what is to come. Only 3 have shown up, leaving the Countess unsatisfied. Fortunately, she only needs one of them for tonight. Hugo believes Ilona to be a murderer that is responsible for the Count's conveniently timed death. A gentle banter and smooth start to the evening results in the 3 men toasting to Ilona. She has a permanent sarcastic wit about her as they go on about their own grotesque topics.
Because I love you.
With Hugo asking if the Count's hideous reputation was in fact true. Ilona thought he was worse, fueling the idea that they were invited to celebrate his death. Apparently,
He was attacked by wolves.
Hugo is confused, but the young Count interrupts, only to be treated by the presence of the drunk, smoking, mostly nice older men. The 3 of them acknowledge how unlikely it is that such a cruel man could be responsible for a son as pretty and polite as Bella. And sure enough, Ilona suggests that one of them, including the yet-to-arrive guest, is actually the father of her son. She practically hypnotises them in quite an enchanting scene with a beautiful jingle from this little brown music box she has. I like the editing, especially taking into account it was done on cheap videotape, which is really difficult to edit even after being around for over 10 years by this point. When Ilona goes to bed, the men talk of lycanthropy, with Klaus recounting a case involving a man who murdered and cannibalised a 12-year-old girl. Ugh. It's an interesting conversation that's obviously a sign of things to come, but when they all go to bed, Hugo starts to feel strange. He's been spiked, thank God, with a pink-filtered POV, excusing leaving Ilona when confronted by her because he was too admired by everyone around him. He is a true narcissist, terrified of his youth leaving him with every little line that forms on his facial skin. To be honest, he might as well be dead. A suitable fate befalls him when, while playing the organ, the lycanthropic menace breaks through the window and mutilates him in horrific fashion. His screams echo throughout the castle, and Felix and Zoltan can only hope that they aren't next, Zoltan believing the price has been paid. Hugo's betrayal vanity, and lust have become his undoing. When we return to Club of the Damned, the pompous twat finally gets inside and sits down to listen to the rest of the story. There's a pretty good recap of the preceding episode that gets the audience up to date in a good way. Still, I can only feel truly sorry for the few people who saw the show in 1977 and missed the first episode. There's more beautiful shots of Ilona in the woods, and it's further established that Bella has a fondness for candied fruits. Felix has already added silver to his collection of amorous conquests. Ultimately, he is the most charming and seductive, which adds to a disturbing layer in terms of him having been in a position of trust as a doctor. Hugo, meanwhile, has been left under a rug to be taken away at a later date. The fourth guest, Baron Joseph von Haller, the most illustrious of the men, arrives late in a horse carriage. He is a politician and a man of principle on the surface, but in reality, he is loud, rude, and grumpy, believing the whole situation to be sinister. There's also a suggestion he had to pay for his title like Zoltan did, making the tension between them evident from the moment they speak to one another. The dialogue remains strong and the cast dynamics remain impeccable, especially as the question of Bella's birth also falls on the Baron. While the Baron seriously suspects that Hugo was the victim of an actual murder, instead of some kind of vicious beast attack like Kraus suspects, Zoltan tells this joke I actually thought was kind of funny.
This one did found poor Hoffman playing the organ.
A music critic in wolf's clothing.
Another kind of funny moment is when Silver almost slips up in revealing her feelings for the Doctor when asked what she thinks of the Baron, being given some rather sound advice about parenthood.
Never have a child.
The Baron is very inquisitive about the tragedy that took place, wondering if there is a pattern in the wild animal behaviour that happened the night before. Andras claims the police will not come, the carriage had an accident, and there are no horses, leading Kraus to conclude that Andras is trying to tell them that the Countess does not want them to leave. Kraus just revels in the fact that the Baron is scared, wondering why the Countess is not afraid considering what has happened, seemingly confirming she is plotting against them. Since the Baron is new, he remains somewhat hypnotised by Ilona's beauty, while the other two are more disinterested, knowing full well deep down that they aren't safe, but they remain calm. Of course, Ilona knows that Felix has already seduced Silver, making jokes about how she's of bad blood, as well as joking, I hope, about poisoning Zoltan, but the Baron is completely unamused. The lullaby once again plays from the wooden box and the men enter another ethereal state of relaxation. The Baron remains furious over Hugo's corpse, but Zoltan continues to joke, unable to truly comprehend the situation. Ilona reassures the Baron that Hugo's body will be taken care of. Zoltan starts to believe that lycanthropy could indeed be the explanation behind what happened, but no man, no matter his psychological state, could ever cause such injuries. Could he? As if the Baron was suspicious from the moment he heard of the Count's unfortunate death, a silver bullet is quietly confiscated from one of the guests, namely the Baron. He is now drugged and will be the wolf's next victim. Even when he's at his weakest, he has some really wrong ideas about how Ilona perceived their love, perhaps being more obsessed with her than she ever was with him. It's interesting to me because, essentially, Ilona was a sexually active woman who had many lovers and had many opportunities to marry, but they threw her aside each time. Because it's the 1800s, what is nowadays a normal thing, she has been made to appear villainous in the eyes of the men who screwed her over and used her up. The Baron going as far as to demand forgiveness while she idly stares in the distance before getting bored and leaving him to rant without even realising she's left the room until he shuts up and turns around. Either way, the Baron's next, thank God.
Forgive me, once and for all time!
Ilona!
The increasingly distressed men have healthy tea and discuss the events that just took place. Felix is very confident that he will not be killed by the beast, believing he was truly adored by Ilona and couldn't be on the kill list. Zoltan believes he will survive by buying his way out, a particularly strong sign of the desperation that they are slipping into with every second that passes. I know I said Stefan Gates' performance as Bella wasn't great, but there is a scene where the kid tells them the only thing that the wolf kills, and it's actually quite creepy.
Now tell me, aren't you, well, just a little bit afraid of what you call, the wolf?
The wolf only kills his enemies.
Zoltan attempts to bribe Andrus, so confident that he can escape alive. Felix is convinced he has Silva under his control, but all he can do is stare at her breasts as his drugged mind succumbs to the effects of the drink he so naively accepted, despite the tragic events that have taken place. Ilona cares not for Zoltan's protests or belief that the wolf does not exist. He admits knowing of the Baron's political exploitation, Felix's lust, and Hugo's narcissism, but he truly doesn't understand why he is targeted. He is not greeted by a coach, but instead by the unseen beast that attacks him outside the front door. Ilona delivers one final speech to Felix, reminding him that all four of them were guilty of the same crime. Felix is the last to succumb to his fate as the tension comes to a nail-biting conclusion, accepting it as he drops to the floor and stares at the wide-open door left open by Andras, the howling wind creeping in. The wolf is not just any wolf, but is in fact the lycanthrope Count Tyr. In his death, he became her creature, instead of her being his. Felix even admits to his crime against Ilona as death looms over him in the form of a shadowy lycanthrope, begging it to spare him. When the murder spree finally ends, the sunshine and family sentiment return to the mansion, with the twisted expectation that Bella will one day become the lycanthrope. Supernatural revenge.
Sure is sweet.
The Club of the Damned discuss the story, but the pompous one demands they reconsider allowing he into the club, fearing he is the Count's human form. Although he confirms that he is not in fact the Count himself, reassuring them the creature was destroyed long ago. He is in fact the fateful son.
And a little candied fruit.
Both of these episodes get a solid 9 out of 10 from me. Mr. Nightingale, thank God, continues the trend of using film to tell the tales of the Club of the Damned. This time, a frail, eccentric old man with disgusting teeth, large moles, and Einstein hair is the candidate to join, coming in wheezing with 2 canes and assistants. Each member of the club finds him difficult to look at, and rightfully so. His tale takes place in Hamburg, 1842, 18 years after the Great Fire. Not only is he eccentric, but he is completely mad by his own admission. Mr. Nightingale is, at its core, a bizarre, supernatural character study of a bachelor well into his 30s being urged to marry, only to find himself slowly going insane in a foreign environment. I think we've all been there, Chief. He's an unreliable narrator who may not be relaying things exactly as they panned out, but the story really is insane. As a younger, shy English bachelor of 35, he is sent to Hamburg not only to sort out some business affairs, but to find a wife in his father's German business partner Herr Stiekbeck's daughter, Elise. But it's clear his timid, emotionally inhibited nature fails to impress her, and he's also too much of a cuck to act on the other sister, Felicitas, flirting with him. The family are very nice, but they give Nightingale a reverse treatment, meaning they basically treat him like how most patronising English language speakers treat foreign Europeans who have come to stay with them, only they're a lot more polite than the average stuck-up British family, taking a genuine interest in English culture, such as fish and books, although they confuse American literature for being English. Steekbeck's mother is a fun character, although she doesn't have as much screen time as I would personally prefer. The actor who plays her does an amazing job with the script that she's given, and for the brief time she is there, she's very memorable. Despite this, the whole tone and atmosphere is uncanny and bizarre, even during normal conversations. The dialogue is really tight and the performances are solid, but as it goes on, Jeremy Brett is sometimes over the top, but his duality and convincing performances both young and old are nothing short of admirable. Nightingale is not only unwell, but his intense fear of love and death steers him further towards madness, especially because of the bedroom he stays in.
Every night, sleepless night, outside the window.
Whenever in occupation, the room plagues him with ominous visions of black seagulls and an uneasy feeling someone or something is watching him. A lot of the sights are obvious matte paintings or blue screens, but they're very beautiful nonetheless, especially the inclusion of seagulls. Sure enough, he's confronted by an identical twin who seemingly merges with him in a sequence with very trippy editing. He was always scared of the room after dark, but now his fear has quintupled. So thanks a lot, Evil Twin. The Star Wars screen wipes also gave me a chuckle. The influence of the supposed ghostly doppelganger turns Nightingale into a more unkind and ruthless individual, with only brief moments of being his former self. It's kind of a Jekyll and Hyde inspired story in my opinion. He even accuses Herr Steekbeck of irregularities, despite his family very kindly being enamoured when he reads them a story.
Saying, Nightingale? Are you saying there is some irregularity in our accounts? That I, a senator? Yes.
He beds Elise and leaves her to run downstairs with her hair undone, reciprocates Felicita's flirting, which obviously upsets Elise, and he becomes more grotesque when he eats, even chowing down on fish, which he claims he didn't like before. My personal favourite line in the whole episode he says to Felicitas is,
I love fish. Of any kind.
What, the fish supper you're having?
Pretty soon, his civilised but awkward behaviour around the family completely breaks down into a brazen, repulsive, and just fucking rude one. Despite his unpleasant demeanour, Elise remains attracted to Nightingale, revealing she is with child and asking him to stay for a few more weeks. He is haunted and twitches at the seagull's cries, causing Elise to run away in fear. The low budget is apparent, but the set design, costumes, and gothic aura remain strong, even during scenes where he and Felicitas walk along the docks, hoping that the ships burn again, giving Felicitas a bizarre sexual thrill at the thought. The family tries to make Nightingale somewhat happy, even making what they think is an omelette. He's unhappy with it, obviously, describing it as a stuffed pancake, overcooked as well. His disrespect reaches its peak when he pours beer all over the cookbook while Frau Steekbeck tries to read up on omelettes. I wasn't expecting a sexual assault of an old lady in this series, but here we are. Felicitas seems to enjoy Nightingale's sadistic behaviour a bit too much, only for the dinner to be interrupted by his doppelganger causing a ship to burn just like the Great Fire. Felicitas goes mental and runs straight into the burning chaos at the doppelganger's insistence for some reason, and Mr. Nightingale appears to just enjoy predicting the days of death of the family. He's pretty fucking sick and evil. The final part of the story is a great scene, mostly shot on film but spliced with videotape shots, showing Nightingale writing a letter to the family. The letter is truly fucking horrible, as he pretty much mockingly apologises for Felicitas' death and Elise's miscarriage and institutionalisation. He offers his most humble and sincere apologies before almost boasting about going to the seaside. He also tells them that the direction of his father's company will no longer be required by Steekbeck's, essentially ruining the family. Rightfully so, and perhaps for his own good, the eccentric old man is sentenced to death by the Club of the Damned. Nobody can see the doppelganger by the candelabra, believing him to be nothing more than a crazed murderer. You would think they'd believe him after the weird things they experienced in the first two stories, but I guess not. Perhaps a worse fate would be to leave him alive, forever seeing the creature that drove him mad lurking in the shadows.
Mr. Nightingale. I regret to have to tell you that you have failed to satisfy us. Your story was bizarre, but patently untrue. This other person doesn't exist, never has existed.
Oh, gentlemen, you must all be blind. Look there. He smiles. No, I swear it. Every word that I have said is true. Every word. This is not my day. I shall live for a long time. I have his word for it.
It definitely plays on the whole Jekyll and Hyde angle, and I myself am personally convinced that Nightingale was some sort of paranoid schizophrenic, but that really adds to the story for me. Again, I think psychology was considered quite supernatural in the 1800s in that no one really understood what mental illness truly was, so this fits into the show perfectly. This episode gets an extremely strong 8 out of 10 for me. It could go up to a 9 maybe if I watch it again, definitely not a 7, but it is an 8.